Howdy class, it's time for my low-effort, unscripted video. This will be another Mr. Hayden Talks Over Music video. It will be a bit higher quality because I won't be just streaming off of YouTube and letting my microphone pick up my horrible computer sounds. I have actually bought this song and will be putting the audio in underneath my video. Aren't you happy? So we will be listening to Symphonie Fantastique, Movement 5, Dreams of a Witch's Sabbath. The reason why I chose this song is, one, I have a book which extensively talks about this piece. It's also part of a really interesting symphony and is a genre of music which we haven't really discussed in great detail. Symphonie Fantastique is the epitome, it is the pinnacle of the genre of program music, which means that it is music which tells a story through the music. It has no words, so all of the story has to be conveyed either by program notes, which were handed out at the concert, or through what happens in the music, which is very cool, and it's something that really only started happening in the Romantic era and with Hector Berlioz. I'm going to read a lot from this book because it knows more than I do. It's a bit wordy, a bit academic. This is a college textbook, so I will try to make it a bit more approachable. Hector Berlioz wrote his Symphonie Fantastique in 1830 when he was only 26 years old. So that's a little bit older than me, but younger than probably most of your teachers. At that time, he was deeply impacted by German Romanticism, especially a poet Goethe, and Beethoven's symphonies. And Beethoven's symphonies are absolutely wonderful. He originally called the symphony An Episode in the Life of an Artist, Fantastic Symphony in 5 parts. That's another interesting thing about this symphony is most symphonies are only 4 parts. This one is 5 parts, and we're listening to the 5th part right now. The first performance had been planned for May of 1830, but had to be canceled because their dress rehearsal was very, very bad. Berlioz had hired 130 musicians, and the stage that he was planning to rehearse on was not large enough. But eventually it did premiere instead of in May. Half a year later, in December, is when it finally premiered. The concert also featured other works by Berlioz, including an overture and a cantata, which had won him a very prestigious musical prize earlier that year. The symphony, as I said, has 5 movements, and for the most part, it follows the typical symphony format. It has a fast sonata with a long slow introduction in the beginning, a dance, a slow movement, and a fast finale, but it has a march in the 4th movement instead of... normally a symphony would not have that march in there. Berlioz wrote a very detailed program, which I will read almost verbatim, because it's a wild story, and I might as well just let him tell you. And these were passed out at the program. So when they were performing the piece, they were like, here you go, here's your program. So I'll start reading those. So it starts off with kind of an introduction. The composer has aimed to develop, to the extent that they can be rendered in music, various situations in the life of an artist. The plan of the instrumental drama, since it lacks the assistance of words, needs to be outlined in advance. Thus, the following program should be considered in the same way as the spoken words of an opera, serving to introduce the pieces of music whose character and expression it motivates. So essentially, what Berlioz is saying here is, I tried to capture what it is and it's what the life of an artist is like, but you really need this program to understand what's going on. Consider it's like watching a TV, if you don't have this program, it's like watching a TV show where no one speaks, is essentially what he's saying. So for the first part, which is called Dreams and Passions, the author supposes that a young musician affected by the moral malady that one celebrated writer calls the wave of passions, he sees for the first time a woman who joins together all the charms of the ideal being of which his imagination has dreamed and falls madly in love. By peculiar quirk, the beloved image never appears in the artist's mind without being linked to a melody, in which he finds a certain character that is passionate, yet noble and shy. Like that, he ascribes to the object of his love. The melodic reflection, along with its model pursue him ceaselessly, like a double idée fixe obsession. Such is the reason for the constant appearance in all the movements of the symphony of the melody that begins the first allegro. The passage from this state of melancholy reverie, interrupted by some unprovoked fits of joy, to that of a delirious passion, with its movements of fury, of jealousy, its return to tenderness, its tears, its religious consolations, is the subject of the first movement. So, that was a very wordy way of saying that a dude falls in love with a girl and becomes obsessed. And this actually has a lot of bearing in Berlioz's own life. He fell madly in love with an English actress at the time. Like, wildly. Like, you see, like, in TV shows, like, there's that boy who just would die for this girl. It's essentially what it is. Berlioz did end up marrying her, but it was not a happy relationship. The idée fixe is a recurring melody. So sort of think of like in Star Wars how dun 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 dun. You hear that, you're like Darth Vader. Sort of the same thing, but the idée fixe is a bit different, but it is a recurring theme which symbolizes something else. Not to be confused with the leitmotif like in Star Wars, even though it's pretty similar. Let's move on to our second movement. This description is significantly shorter. The artist is placed in the most varied circumstances of life, in the middle of the tumult of a party, in the peaceful contemplation of the beauties of nature, but everywhere in the city and the country the beloved image appears to him, and sows confusion in his heart. So this is sort of like, he's going about his day-to-day life, but his love is just distracting him. He can't get away from it. It's everywhere. It's in a party. It's in nature. It's in the city. It's everywhere. He cannot escape. And in the third, called A Scene in the Country, finding himself one evening in the country, he hears in the distance two shepherds who pipe back and forth a Ranz die Vache, Swiss melody, which is a Swiss melody used to summon cows. This pastoral duet, the scene, the light rustle of the trees gently agitated by the winds, some grounds for hope that he recently conceived, all converge to return to his heart an unaccustomed calm, to give a happier tinge to his ideas. He reflects on his isolation. He hopes soon to be no longer alone. But what if she misled him? This mixture of hope and fear, these ideas of happiness disturbed by some dark presentiments, form the subject of the adagio. At the end, one of the shepherds again takes up the Ranz die Vache. The other does not respond. Distant noise of thunder. Solitude. Silence. So here the artist has gone away. He's gone to the country to just get away from the city life, get away from the hustle and bustle. And he hears two shepherds singing to each other. And then suddenly he starts doing that thing people do when they start overthinking romantic things, and it's like, what if she's misleading me? What if something's wrong? And then this is further symbolized later when one shepherd sings the song and there's no response. It's solidifying his fears that perhaps their love isn't reciprocated. Next up we have part 4. Probably the most famous part of this symphony. It's called March to the Scaffold. Having become certain that his love is ignored, the artist poisons himself with opium. The dose of the narcotic, too weak to grant him death, plunges him into a sleep accompanied by the strangest visions. He dreams that he has killed her whom he loves, that he is condemned and conducted to the scaffold, and that he is witnessing his own execution. The procession advances to the sounds of a march, at times dark and savage, at times brilliant and solemn, in which a muffled sound of solemn steps is followed without transition by the noisiest clamor. At the end of the march, the first 4 measures of the idée fixe reappear like a last thought of love interrupted by the fatal blow. So essentially, he tries to kill himself, goes on a trip, and thinks he has killed his love, and then gets marched to the scaffold to be hanged and to be killed. And then right before he dies, he hears his love. And then he dies. Very happy things. Part 5, which is what we're listening to, Dream of a Witch's Sabbath. Within, he sees himself at a witch's sabbath in the midst of a dreadful company of ghosts, sorcerers, and monsters of all kinds, who have assembled for his funeral. Strange noises, moaning, bursts of laughter, distant cries to which other cries seem to respond. The beloved melody reappears once more, but it has lost its character of nobility and shyness. It is no more than a wretched, commonplace, grotesque dance tune. It is she who comes to the Sabbath, the roars of joy at her arrival. She joins in the diabolical fracas, funeral knell, burlesque parody of the Dies Irae, which is Sabbath round dance. The Sabbath round dance and the Dies Irae together. So the Dies Irae, if you have ever watched The Hunchback of Notre Dame, is a Dies Irae, Dies Irae. That's everywhere in that movie. It comes from the Catholic Mass. If I'm not mistaken, it means Lord have mercy. It's about the judgment of God. So in this movement, the artist has descended into the underworld while witches, ghouls, demons are all having the time of their lives in the underworld, and then his love shows up, and she's kind of like the ringleader of them all. So they rejoice that she is there, and continues to taunt him even in death, and that's where it ends. Isn't that fun? So the thing, and this is alluded to earlier, the thing that is connecting all of the music, all of the movements is the ID Feeks. I don't have just a solitary recording of that, but it recurs in different forms in all of the movements, often interrupting other musical material, just like we talked about in March to the Scaffold, where it only plays the first part of it and it's interrupting this March to the Scaffold, and then our artist dies. Also, it shows up in various forms, like was mentioned in Witch's Sabbath, where it's lost a lot of those happy and shy and noble characters, and now it's sinister, it's evil. So there's really a lot of things going on in this symphony. It's a super fascinating story, and it's sort of one of those stories that you can only really imagine happening in like an opera or something. It's very convoluted. The music, I feel, does a good job of conveying it, but if you didn't know what it was, I don't think you would know what was going on. So I think it's just really fascinating. So for today's assignment, in relation to this video, I want you to just go in and answer the questions that I've made there for you. I hope you enjoyed the video, enjoyed the music. I like it, but what's my opinion matter? Have a great day. Hope to hear from you soon.